Hello and welcome to Series 3 of Crisis What Crisis, a podcast designed to be a useful field guide as we all try to navigate and continue to come to terms with a dramatically changed world. Whether personal, professional or both, crisis is without doubt the new shared experience. I'm Andy Coulson, a former newspaper editor, Downing Street Director of Communications and one-time inmate of HMP Belmarsh. For the last 5 years, I've put all of my experience, the good and the bad, to use as a strategic advisor to business leaders. And I can tell you the bad has been just as useful as the good. And that got me thinking as the first lockdown began that there are plenty of great podcasts out there where you can hear stories of success, but there are far fewer where you can benefit from the experience of those whose lives have properly unraveled. So in Crisis What Crisis, I talk to the embattled, shamed, courageous, ruined, damaged, resilient, unlucky and lucky survivors of crisis. Some names will be familiar, some less so. Our guests share their experiences, though, with honesty, often with humour, but always in the hope that they might be useful to anyone facing down their own demons and challenges. But simply, these are crisis conversations worth sharing. Stay tuned at the end of the episode when I'll give my thoughts and takeaways, the lessons, if you like, for when life unravels. And if you enjoy the podcast, please do subscribe and give us a rating and a review. It really helps make sure these stories reach an even wider audience of people who may find them useful. And that, in the end, is what it's all about. Crisis What Crisis is generously supported by Mindstream, a brilliant company who harness the power of music for personal well-being, whether it be music for meditation, to help focus, sleep, stress relief, yoga and fitness, rejuvenation, even grief and loss. Mindstream is there to improve human performance. I've tried it, it works, and I'd recommend having a listen to the Mindstream catalogue yourself. Just search Mindstream, that's mind with a Y, on Spotify. Thanks again for joining me. Joining me today is the remarkable Claire Danson, the former European age group triathlon champion. Claire's life changed forever on August the 28th, 2019, when a cycling accident left her with catastrophic injuries. Most seriously, Claire's spinal cord was severed, leaving her permanently paralysed from the chest down. The story that I think we will hear today is one of crisis, of course, but it's also a story of astonishing resilience, character, and even optimism. The approach that Claire, who also works as a science tutor, has taken to her recovery provides lessons for us all. Lessons in perspective, but also in the real meaning of purpose. Claire Danson, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Hi, really great. Thank you very much. Yeah, good.
Good. Well, we're just delighted to have you on the podcast. Claire, if I may, I'd like to start by reading something that you wrote about 8 weeks, I think, after your accident.
Yeah.
This is you telling the world for the first time what has happened to you. And as a piece of what is essentially crisis communication, I'm really not sure I've ever read anything more impressive. So if you'll allow me, I'll just read it. On the 28th of August, I had a collision with a tractor whilst riding my bike. I suffered 2 punctured lungs, broke a finger, both wrists, the head of my humerus and both shoulders. I also fractured all the bones in my neck, including a break tool one, and had multiple fractures and breaks to every one of my ribs. I've had quite a few surgeries to sort all this and now have a large amount of metal in me. All of this will heal fully. Unfortunately, I also suffered a complete sever to my spinal cord at T9. This means that I am paralysed from the belly button downwards. This is, of course, not something that will heal. Whilst I still have hard moments, I have accepted the situation I'm now in and won't be letting it stop me do anything that I want to, including triathlon. Now you have this info. All I ask is for you to remember that I'm still exactly the same person. I still have crazy hair and a mad laugh. I'm still the clumsiest person you've met. And I will still tell the most long-winded yet entertaining stories. So please treat me as the same old Claire. Nothing has changed there. Astonishing, Claire, but words that do beg a question. How were you able to get to that level of clarity, to be so present in a crisis that was still so raw?
that's a big question. I think, although it was obviously so fresh still, I'd been through so much in that first 8 weeks that I'd had some time to process, and I've never been one to give up on anything. So it was a case of, well, this has happened, and I'm still going to be the same person. I'm still going to get my life back on track, and that's what I need people to know. My family being around me made a huge difference as well. They didn't leave. There was always someone with me. I was never on my own through the whole time I was in hospital, actually. And I was in rehab till March, so that's like 7 months of being in hospital. Obviously they left at night, but so I think that helped me to get to that point. And I think I just got to that point where I needed to let people know. There were, obviously my close friends knew what happened to me, but it was something that needed to be told, and there needed to be a way to let people know, look, this has happened, but I'm no different. And when you see me again, yes, I'll be in a wheelchair, but that's just a physical side to me. There's a lot more to me than what I can do with my body.
It's the speed that's one of the kind of incredible elements of that sort of state of mind that you got yourself in. I mean, it's just so. I mean, we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, because there are other, actually, frankly, more visceral examples of your ability to think practically and to see what was ahead of you. But we'll get to that. But at this stage, it's just, it's 8 weeks, and I can see, of course, that 8 weeks must in a way felt like a lifetime, because so much was happening to you. But it's less the kind of understanding of the physical. It's the unbelievable ability to get into the right place mentally. I mean, when you hear those words sort of read back to you there, are you surprised that you were saying those things so quickly?
I think it made me laugh when I said the words, I still tell really good stories. I mean, anyone that knows me knows my stories are not necessarily good. Long, yes. Make people laugh, because sometimes they have no point. So actually my first thought was, God, was I trying to be funny? But at the same time, it does, I think, bring back to me the seriousness of the situation that I was in. And there's almost a part of me that feels for that person in that hospital bed. I can remember writing it, remembering how unable I was at that point, because I still had so far to go, so much ahead of me. And I suppose there is a part of me that looks back and thinks, well, I was brave. There was so much going on and so much uncertainty still at that point. There's an element of, as well, at that point, naivety, I suppose, in that still only 8 weeks in, you don't quite comprehend quite the situation and quite how life will be different. At that point, you're still very much at, I figured when I was, the way I would talk about, I would describe it to someone is, as you, the sort of kind of the first few weeks was literally about staying alive. And then from that moment on, it's about, well, at first everyone doing everything for you. And then as time goes on, you kind of almost get a bit drip fed as to, well, actually this is going to be different now as well. And well, now you can try and do this for yourself, but you're going to have to do it differently. And those kind of realizations didn't all come at once. It wasn't like a split second of, well, now you're in a wheelchair, this is everything you're going to be faced with. Kind of came bit by bit, which actually was good, because I don't know how you could possibly, if someone said to you and like listed everything, I don't know how anyone would deal with that.
Claire, can I just ask, in terms of the sort of nature of your injury, I described it in the intro, I think, as being from the chest down. In your message that you sent out, you said it's from the belly button down. And as I understand it, in that stage, that's what you thought in fact the nature of the injury changed.
Yeah, so obviously in the early days it was all so new to us that we sort of just listened to what the doctor said and trying to take everything in. So when I wrote that message, we believed I was T9, which is where my back was broken, and that would be belly button down. However, they have like a testing system in hospital, and actually it became apparent that I'm actually, in terms of where my sensation finishes and function and things, I'm actually T5, which is more chest down. So it's a little bit higher.
But that message though was just one, as I say, just one demonstration of your elite level resilience, if I can describe it that way. But Claire, before we talk about your accident in more detail, can we talk a little bit about life before? As a triathlete, you were flying. The European win was just one of your successes. As I understand it, the kind of target of becoming a professional was ahead of you. Tell us a bit about where you were, what your plan was at that time.
So the goal was to get my professional racing license at 70.3, so kind of half Ironman distance. And I was actually just on my last like easy ride out before I was supposed to be flying off the next day to Zell-am-See to race there. And that would have been a place where I would have tried to have got my professional license. So it was literally a case of I would have got home, packed my bike up and flown off the next day. So yeah, that was really where I was with my sporting career.
So leaving the house that day, that's where your mind is. I mean, you're flying off the following day. You're fully focused on that.
Yeah. I guess it was sort of just like in every other ride, really, in terms of it was just a case of going out to turn my legs over and then that was that. I didn't, you just go out thinking you're doing what you always do. Just wasn't quite the same as always that day.
Yeah. But your sort of levels of determination at that point and focus and, this is where I'm heading, if you like, were pretty heightened, given that you were about to go into what could be a very significant moment in your career.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think sport's always been such a part of my life that I've always been driven and that kind of thing. So I guess, yeah, I would agree. It sort of would have been something that I was thinking about and kind of prepared for, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, you've talked about how you've been able to fill in the blanks, if you like, about what happened with the accident itself, if you don't mind me asking. What's your memory of it now? Has more of it come back to you, or one assumes that it's pretty limited? And as I say, you've been able to kind of fill in the gaps from other people's accounts.
Yeah, so a lot of it is kind of filled in. I was actually, so in terms of my consciousness, as it were, I was actually awake for the whole time. I don't remember big parts of it. And I think that's just an amazing capacity that your brain has to switch off, obviously, things that it doesn't want you to remember. I remember seeing the tractor. I remember pulling to the side of the tractor to avoid it. And then I don't remember the actual collision itself. So I collided with the trailer of the tractor. And then I don't remember much else. I remember... So I would say to people, it was the most unlucky accident anyone could have, because the first person on the scene, other than the tractor driver himself, was a family friend of ours who was a retired anaesthetist. So not only did I have someone I knew there, which I think makes a difference, but also somebody who was able to get the air ambulance out and make sure that I wasn't moved and all that sort of thing. So I do remember saying his name a lot, and I remember him holding my hand. And I remember wanting him to be there. And
your parents were there quickly, because you weren't that far from home, right? So
I was about 10 minutes from home. So I don't remember this, but I gave my parents' phone number to the tractor driver. So he called them and they were there. They're actually there before the ambulance was. So, and again, I think it helped. I can't know, obviously, but I'm sure it must have helped just knowing they were there.
This word lucky that you've applied to this situation also speaks volumes, of course, that you just look at it that way, instinctively. But I mean, how do you even from this distance? How do you use a word like lucky for such an appalling moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think obviously the accident itself was just so unfortunate, and the most, obviously I would have never wanted anything like that to happen. But I just think that there was so much around it. It could have gone so differently. I do genuinely believe there were so many fortunate things that happened. The break in my neck was actually pretty much exactly the same as the one that was in my back, but the difference was that it wasn't displaced. So in terms of my luck, to me, I feel incredibly fortunate that my injury wasn't higher. So if you have, obviously, the higher up your injury, the less function you have. And if I'd had the same injury on my back but it was in my neck, then potentially I would be on I have a tracheostomy in, mm-hmm. So breathing through my neck. I wouldn't have any hand function. So in terms of lucky, unlucky, I consider myself to be extremely fortunate because I do have use of my hands, and that enables me to be fully independent.
So this is a kind of hard to grasp demonstration of the power of perspective.
Yes, I think so.
And that has obviously been something that you kind of were able to kind of identify and grab hold of very quickly, but that presumably is with you now continually. That sort of the importance of perspective.
Yes, and I think there are in most situations in life, there are ways of viewing things and ways to look for the positives. Obviously, there are more difficult situations to do that in. If I was sitting here and I had an injury to my neck, then I might be finding it very difficult to speak to you how I am now. So obviously there are more difficult ways to think that sort of circumstances to think that way in. But I do think it's important to try and find that way around if you can. How is it positive, or how can I think of this that makes it not feel quite so terrible, or that I can be able to move on with it and kind of not let it hold me down or be something that makes me unhappy all the time.
Yeah. You're taken to intensive care at Southampton Hospital initially. I think your parents are told that you may not make it, but it becomes clear in the hours and days that follow that you will thankfully survive. It also becomes clear to your doctors that they're dealing with an extraordinary human being, not just your levels of fitness, Claire, which I think you've said certainly contributed to your survival, the fact that you were so physically fit, but this mental toughness that we're talking about. You're on a ventilator when you start to communicate with the help of your sister Alex and an alphabet board. You squeeze her hand, as I understand it, when she points to the letter that you want to use. We should explain this is in the immediate aftermath. This is when you're obviously you're now conscious, but this is the very, very early stages of your recovery.
Yeah.
And through this painstaking process, you spell out the word para-athlete.
Yeah.
And you make clear that you want the very best surgeon to give you the very best chance of becoming that athlete.
Yeah.
What do you remember about those moments now?
It's a part of being in intensive care that I remember really vividly. One of the for things at the forefront of my mind when I was there, and when it became clear to me that particularly my right arm was in a very bad way, and I knew I was paralysed, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to use my legs. It became a very important part of my thought process that I needed to make sure whoever was going to operate on my arm understood that I needed my arm to work really well, and I needed it so that I could carry on doing what I loved, and so that I could carry on doing sport. And it was, as I say, it was really one of the things that when I was awake, I was thinking about, and I remember thinking about it a lot. I remember using the board to spell it out. And I remember the kind of surprise that when my sister realized what I was saying, the kind of, you want me to make sure you've got the best surgeon. I mean, Claire, I don't think we get a choice kind of thing. Although she did do it.
Well, you had a family friend who's a orthopedic surgeon, is that right? And you wanted her to be contacted to make sure that she. Can we just remind ourselves of the situation here for a moment? You are in the first, kind of days of your recovery after the accident that we've described, and you've got this kind of presence of mind. And also this kind of determination, because that is not an easy process, right? To be in the way that you just described as communication with your sister. This is not just you saying something; it is in itself a trial and a test. It's just. Sorry, I'm going to be doing this a lot, I suspect, during the course of our conversation. But it's just astonishing. I did, and the feedback came back to us that he was very good and actually just an amazing man. And again, something that I would say lucky in my story. He spoke to my parents and he said, don't worry, I'm going to get her going fast again. Not a problem. I think my parents are like, please don't. He could have taken offense at it. The fact I'd been like, no, I want someone, and he didn't at all. And he's become such a close friend. He is just a remarkable man, and did the best job of my arm, clearly. And he could have, as you say, he could have taken offence, but he could also have said, "Well, look, I'm the doctor here, and the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that the arm is working." Getting it to the or carrying out this kind of procedure on the basis of a potential future career as a para-athlete, I think that probably is the second priority. But he got what it meant to you, and was, I suspect, also completely blown away in the way that I think anyone listening to this now from this distance would be. I mean, what a sort of clarity that you had at that stage. You were also clear that you wanted those early days of recovery documented, and you asked Alex to take pictures of you in ICU. You wanted it kind of you wanted it to be sort of logged in a way. What was the thinking? What was the thinking there?
I think it was just that I knew that one day it would be important in being able to really remember what had happened to me, and kind of twofold, to help myself when I look back and think, where have I come from? Look at where I am now. And also in a certain respect to hopefully to help others, to show that you can, it can be this bad, but then you can get it to be this good again. And something the whole way through that's been very important to me is using what's happened to me to help other people. I think it's a complete waste if I just crack on with my life and don't use what's happened to help others in some way, no matter what that might be. And I do think the kind of battles and things are, although people have different battles, I think there's a lot of parallels that you can take. So I think if I can't use what I've been through to help others, then to me, it's a bit like, well, what's the point? So again, I think that was part of it in the back of my mind.
These are normally things that take months for people to work out, possibly years, possibly never. And yet you're getting there with that sort of speed of thought. When I try and work out, or as we're talking, perhaps people listening are trying to work out how did you get there that quickly? What is it, do you think, in your life? What is it in your character? Have you been able to sort of trace it back a bit? Have you been able to kind of go before the accident and find the reasons why you were behaving in such an unbelievable way?
I think that's a really interesting question, partly because it's something that I have actually had a little think about recently. And I speaking to somebody about this a couple of weeks ago. And in my mind, partly I think it's my life has followed a sort of a journey, if you like, of very much highs and then other moments of my life that have been very low. And I think throughout, whenever things have got bad, I've found a way to come back, and then something will have happened again and I've come back from it. And I think that sort of, I've been able to carry that through, I think. And almost to me, it's like it's prepared me for this massive event that's then happened. And I think just maybe I've been, again, lucky enough that I've built that resilience over time, so that when something so big does happen, I've already developed a lot of those skills and that mindset that, okay, well, I'll just get through this as well.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that. You've talked a little bit about some of those other difficulties before the accident, with incredible honesty about your battle with anorexia as a teenager and a young woman, a battle that saw you admitted to hospital for lengthy periods. At one stage, your family, again, were not sure you would make it through, as I understand it. You survive what must have been terrifying and utterly wretched experience. But your view is that it in some way prepared you for the what was to come. You hold to this idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That you're building a resilience.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's also important to remember that although I had those times that, as you say, as you described, were absolutely wretched, and again something I wouldn't wish on anyone. There were also in amongst that incredibly happy times. So it's almost like despite those horrible things happening, I was able to get back to school. I was able to do my GCSEs, and I remember that as a very happy period of time. And it's almost, and it's important not to forget it's almost because I had those very positive experiences. It's easy to almost just forget the bad times, because yes, they were part of it, but a much more important part of my life was coming out of hospital again and re-being with my friends and getting my GCSEs and getting my A-levels, and all that kind of thing. And
you knew, didn't you? You knew how tough you are. You knew how resilient you are because of all that. You probably didn't say it much to yourself.
Yeah, I guess
but deep down, you knew.
I guess it was something that I never really thought of before. And I also feel like it's something, and I think I genuinely have always thought that it's, although yes, I've dealt with these things, in my mind I think, well, and when people say to me, I don't know how I do it, in my view, I think, well, if you were faced with the same situation, you probably would, because the option is to do what I'm doing, or potentially to be unhappy and to give up, and I think most people probably would say, well, do you know what, I am going to crack on and I'm going to do what I can and I'm going to find things that I can do, because otherwise, well, I don't know, I don't see there's much of another option.
I think most people would, though, on occasion ask themselves, why me?
I did, I think to be fair, at first I thought I did, obviously we haven't mentioned obviously the times where I have cried and I have been upset, but generally, and I was just thinking, I've actually ever said why me? I don't think I have actually particularly thought why me. I think I've thought I wish this hadn't happened. actually, I don't think that very often at all now. Not to say that obviously if someone said to me, we'll wave a wand and we'll take it away, I'd let them.
Yes.
But purely because it would be easier. But I don't wake up in the morning anymore and think, oh, I wish this wasn't my life. Partly because I like my life. It's not what I would have chosen, but it's still very happy.
Yes.
You
don't strike me as someone who has ever carried much bitterness.
No, I don't think that the emotion in itself would be one that I'd feel very comfortable with. I think it would be one that would actually probably make me feel worse if I felt it. And again, it's just it's a case of building your life up so there's not really time to feel bitter anyway, because there's too many good things going on.
Are there practical things you do to kind of steer yourself in the right way? I mean, are there sort of triggers for you that you try to avoid, or are there techniques that you use?
I think inadvertently, probably being really super busy is something that probably helps me, because it's not time to necessarily think about the situation I'm in. And also I've rebuilt my life in such a way that actually, other than the fact that the way that I do things obviously is a bit different now, it's actually not different to what my life was before, in that I work, I train, I see my friends, I do everything very much as I did before, I'd say, except for now when I train, I have a hand bike, or I go out in my wheelchair, or I don't swim at the moment because we're not allowed. But so I think I'm steering away from the question. Oh yeah. So I think in terms of things that I do, I think it's just that I have brought my life back to being exactly what it would have been. And that helps me, because I did have and do have a life that I have built up so that I'm doing things I love and that I'm happy with. So I think for me, it's probably the thing that I have done to help me to cope with things is just to get my life back. Which again is something that I'm very fortunate that I could do, because the things that I did before were things that I could do again.
That must have been a particular frustration for everybody, I suppose, but for you of a slightly different order, with the situation that we've gone through, that's kind of stopped you from being able to plan as much as you want to do as much as you want to do. For you, that's even more, from the sound of it, even more difficult. I mean, how have you coped with with this extraordinary situation we're all in?
To be honest with you, I found it okay. And I think the reason being, it's just another situation to adapt to. So obviously in the last 15 months, I've had to adapt hugely, and I've had to think of ways around the box. And if I want to do things that I can't quite do, it's like, well, what do I need to do so that I can do, okay, I can't get in the swimming pool by myself. So what do I need to do so that I can get in the swimming pool to be able to swim? Or actually, the swimming pool is not so bad because they generally have things that help you in. But say the lakes, open water swimming lake, I can't get into it by myself. So what do I need to do to be able to get in? And very much I feel that way with the situation we're in at the moment. Yes, there are things that we can't do. Well, then it's looking about what can we do? Or, for example, getting my hand bike and then it needs some adjustments, but I can't get that adjusted right now. So it's like, well, okay, well, what can I do myself? I've got a towel in it, like shoving the back forward so that it's at the right angle for my back and that kind of thing. It's just about adapting to the situation we're in. And that is something that I have really learned to do, is be a little bit more relaxed. And, if something doesn't seem perfect, well, nothing's really perfect. So you kind of work your way around it and find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
which I think it's like the situation that we're in. You know, no one's able to do things they're used to doing. So it's about finding what you can do and how you can adapt what you do so that it's like an acceptable way of doing things.
I get it. And it's perspective again, I suppose, for you, because, you know, after Southampton Hospital, you're moved to the Duke of Cornwall Hospital in Salisbury, where you stay for 5 or 6 months, I think, in rehab. And as you put it, you have to learn to do everything again. And that, I suppose, is the start of the process that you just described, really, in a way, but in such a unbelievably difficult way. The goal of becoming a para athlete, though, as we touched on, was, you know, immediately clear to you. I mean, immediately clear to you. In rehab, I assume that was, of course, front of mind. Did you start to build your, you know, the sort of the road towards that, which of course, you know, you're still on? Did you start to think about that immediately?
I suppose yes would be the honest answer, but I knew that to begin with, it was, although that was still kind of in my mind, initially it was very much about building strength, just generally learning how to live. But the particular focus was on just getting my right arm moving. I couldn't move my right arm for such a long time, and then and then I couldn't bend. So putting my hand to my face, like the first time I got my hand, that we've got a brilliant, I think it's a video of me trying to eat some chocolate cake. And so for a long time I had to use my left hand because I couldn't get my right hand to my mouth. And I had this spoon, and I was like sticking my chin out to try and get to the spoon and desperately trying to get this like chocolate cake using my right hand. It's a brilliant video. But so it was very much about, and so although it wasn't like training focused or anything, it was about, well, I know that I'm going to need my right arm, so everything is focused on getting that right arm moving properly, so that then when I'm at a point where I can train, it's not going to hold me back and it's not going to stop me doing anything.
So small targets is what you sort of set yourself.
Yeah, very much so. And then again, you know, just so when I was first paralysed, I couldn't hold myself up. I couldn't sit without a massive chair around me. So anything that you're doing just to learn how to, you know, be able to sit again and that sort of thing is all ultimately you'll need to go through all those steps first before you can, you know, do anything that I might have regarded as training as such.
The other important element, I imagine, is, you know, is the people that you have around you. And you've got an incredible family. As you explained, mum and dad been there the whole time, your brother, and also, of course, your sister, Alex. Alex, for anyone who's listening, doesn't realise, is an Olympic gold medalist, captain of the GB hockey team formerly. And she was recovering from a serious injury herself when she got the call about your accident, having had a head injury on holiday. She banged her head against a wall whilst laughing, tragically, and with a very serious injury. It's clear that, you know, the bond between the two of you is incredibly strong. But more, as you played a very important part in, as we've already described, in those early days of your recovery and beyond. How important is it to be around the right people when you are, you know, in crisis? Yours being, you know, incredibly kind of acute.
I think it's absolutely imperative to come through a crisis to be being around, having the right people around you. As you've said, my family being there, and then my friends as well. So I was part of, and still am part of, Precision Race Team, which is a triathlon team. And they were and are still just incredible. They would visit all the time. The two coaches came regularly, as did other friends in the team. Then whilst I was still in rehab, I did a 10k push around Dorney Lake and a 5k push around there. And then when I came out, and once I got hold of my handbike, we went we've been cycling around Goodwood racetrack quite a few times.
Right.
So just being back with them and and training with them again has been, again, another, just something that's made me so happy. But it's going back to what you said about having the right people around you. I just don't know how you would manage it without. And of course, some people wouldn't have had the same support network that I had. But most of the people that I have spoken to that have been through what I've been through say the same. They just don't know what they would do without their family, without their friends.
Yeah. I mean, your friends clearly sort of ran towards the crisis and not away from it.
Definitely.
But how have you found the reactions of others day to day? When you're in a situation like that, particularly once the adrenaline's gone and the drama's gone, and it's it's your life. How have you found the kind of reactions of others? Have you had to adjust? How do you handle it?
I possibly I don't know if I really think about it that often, because I don't know if it is really something that I feel is important. So I'm not explaining this very well. In terms of the reaction of others, I don't see myself as any different. So perhaps I don't perceive the reactions of others that often. And for those people, so obviously the first time, like when I came home and I saw like my parents' friends and things, and obviously there was a lot of, oh, how are you doing? And all that kind of thing. And, I'm very polite and I thought, oh yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. I'm doing this. But now, like, I'll see them out and they'll just be like, oh, hi, Claire. So, but I think it's very normal when you first see someone to be a bit unsure of how to be, but, and that's fine. And like when I've been at events, so I have done a couple of races, the ones that were on, generally people are just great. And actually it's what I love about events anyway, and about sport. People tend to support each other. So when I used to go to races and be at the front, I get people shouting and cheering and things. Well, now I'm at the back, but because I'm in my chair, I get support and cheering. So it's quite, I quite like that. You'll always get the odd person that will say something that you'll think, oh, don't know if I'd say that, or they'll say something, or I got the classic, I was somewhere with my parents and it was for me, it was when I went to get my car actually, and the person came out and started talking to my parents and I was like, hello, it's for me. I can't talk, but that's fine. I mean, people don't realise, and that's part of the thing. There's no,
for some people that would be utterly maddening.
Yeah, and I can understand.
It'd be utterly maddening, and a source of kind of I think a lot of people, again, listening to this may think, well, if that was me, I'd be absolutely livid, and you'd end up in a difficult place, maybe for an hour, maybe for a bit longer, I don't know. But you're clearly very adept, just in the way you described that story. That's fine, that's all right, and you just move on, and that's clearly an unbelievably positive attitude of yours has kind of kept you away from that extra layer of difficulty.
Yeah, and I think with that, it's important just to remember that actually, if people don't know, then you can't really expect them to realise or to understand. So actually, alongside that, again, it's something that's important to me to, in some respects, educate people. Like, you can't expect. Sometimes I think people can get a bit cross about things, when actually really what might be more helpful would be to just say to someone, well, actually, I'd rather you didn't do this. Do you understand, I don't know, X, Y, or Z, and just explain. And then people might be like, oh, okay, I didn't realise. Like, sometimes we expect people just to know things. And, before I was in a chair, I think I only ever knew one other person in a wheelchair. So, and that was one of my friend's dads. And actually, to be honest with you, I was quite young at the time. So I hadn't really taken much on board. So how can I expect people to know if I don't tell them? Or if and actually it's an opportunity to help people to, learn and understand.
Well, there's another demonstration of your instinctive positivity. Let's talk about purpose, Claire. Again, with that characteristic positivity, you've said that you believe the accident has given you, these are my words, not yours, but a higher purpose, right? As an athlete, but also in terms of what you can do for others in your situation, a better understanding. You've touched on it here, a better understanding of what it is to be paralysed first and foremost, and in the way that you communicate. I read out that message at the start of this conversation, but there are countless examples on your social media, on Instagram and elsewhere, where you are giving a very open, honest, very frank account of the challenges that you face as someone who's paralysed, and that's what you mean, as well as obviously the success that we all hope you'll have as a para athlete will be one demonstration, but you want to be able to be part of that discussion, don't you? You want to be able to make that part of your purpose. Well, it is part of your purpose.
Yes, absolutely. 100% I would like that. And I think, as well as kind of introducing people to, as you say, what it's like to be paralysed or what it's like to have a disability. I also think there are just what it's like to be human in a way. There's a lot of what I have written about is I like to try and find parallels. So I don't like it just to be about, well, this is what's happening to me, and that's sort of that. Usually if I'm feeling a certain way, I can think, well, actually, it's not just me that would feel like this. It might be my reasoning for feeling this way is different to someone else's, but actually I'm not the first person to feel sad. I'm not the first person to feel a loss of identity. And so if I can actually hit a chord with anybody, it might be, as I say, using my experiences that may be different to someone else's. I like to think that it might actually help on a kind of wider level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and one imagines that you're already that's the case, right? I mean, you're getting incredible feedback. I think people are recognizing that your response to this awful situation is just you're trying to turn it into something valuable.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's important for those people, but it's important for you too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
And would you say that that's been kind of recognizing that and doing something about it has been a key part of the recovery for you?
Yeah, I do. And actually, again, it gives you that, like you say, that sense of purpose, and that it, on those days where you're feeling like, oh, I really wish this hadn't happened, it gives you something to kind of drive forwards for and say, well, it has happened, but look at all the good you can do now. So, and almost like it's cathartic almost, isn't it? It enables me to really identify how I'm feeling and how I'm coping with things, but also then share that with people. So it is, as you say, it's also a very helpful process for me to go through.
I mean, just reflecting on what you just said, there's an example. I'm sat here using the word recovery, which is probably the wrong word, right? Because there's obviously an element of what has happened to you that is, beyond repair, if I can put it that way. What word do you use? How do you sort of describe, or what word would you use? What word would you use in place of recovery? Or is that the word you use?
Do you mean sort of in terms of the process of what I'm going through?
In terms of the journey, yeah, and where
Yeah, I think I would have used the term recovery, although you're right, because I'm not ever going to recover fully. I don't know if I would use recovery as such now, more than possibly a better word would be just living. I kind of feel like now I've done there's still bits that I can improve on, but I don't know if it's recovering. So because in terms of, my arms are all better and things, there's always things that can be better, but that's life. So I can still get a little bit more movement for my arms. So I still work on that I mean, that's being sporty for you. You're always working on something.
Yeah.
And there's still, I still can't get, if I fall out of my chair, I still can't get back in it by myself, which I will be able to do, but I'm still working on that. I'm very fortunate. I still have an hour of rehab each week. So I suppose in some respects you could see it as recovery, but I suppose I just see it as learning my new life.
Well, there's adapting and there's evolving, right? In that, I suppose. Yeah. Paris 2024 is the target, I think I'm right in saying. You're already clocking up thousands of training miles. What does the year ahead look like?
Well, that's a question, isn't it? So ideally, the year ahead will involve some racing over the summer, but obviously that's fully dependent on the situation that we're in at the moment. I suspect there will be some races within England because there were some sort of the other side of Christmas. There were some duathlons that I did, and actually they can do them in quite a safe way. You just don't have all the mass starts and things. So I suspect once, vaccines have rolled out and things, I should think at some point in the summer there'll be some. And I suppose the main aim is to just see where I'm at. I'm under no illusions. I've got a long way to go if I to get to where I want to be. And there's always that possibility that it won't happen because I don't know. I've not tried to do this before. However, obviously there is that's the hopes. And I will do everything I possibly can to try and get there. And if I don't, then I will have the best time trying. So that's.
Well, I think you can be sure that there are going to be a tremendous amount of people right behind you.
Thank you.
Hoping that you get there. Claire, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for talking to us in such an amazing kind of, never mind your positivity, but just your kind of openness and the way that you've dealt with this is such a terrible situation, I think is utterly inspirational. And I really do appreciate your time. We ask all our guests at the end of our conversations to give us their crisis cures. 3 things that you kind of rely on. Can't be another person, so I'm afraid you can't mention Alex. But they've got to be three things that you tend to turn to in the darker moments. What would yours be?
I would say do something that you love. For me, that's sport. But if you're having a really dark moment or if things are really difficult, find something you love. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be reading a book, it could be listening to some music. Something that you love and that makes you smile will help carry you through without a shadow of a doubt. So that's definitely my first one. Then
is there something else other than sport for you?
What else do I love doing? Being with people would be another thing for me. Just being around people, I just love. I love it. So that would probably be my other thing that I try and do. I try and surround myself with people. That's almost another point really. But yeah, sport being the main thing, and then yeah, just being around people.
Yeah,
be the things that I love doing. The other thing is, I would always say, remember that it's not potentially just a moment, but the way I see it is it's a moment in time. And although what you're going through is very valid and awful, it can get better and it will get better. So it's about not giving up. So if you can remember that it is just now, and so long as you keep going, and obviously there are exceptions to it, but 99 times out of 100, if you just don't give up, you will get there in the end. Yeah. And
is that linked to the small targets bit as well? Set yourself. So you believe in goals, right? And
definitely. I'm definitely
and their power. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say so. definitely. And then my third thing was going to be, but I don't know if this is allowed because I didn't know I wasn't allowed to be people. Actually, no, it's not people. My third thing was going to be talk to someone. If you are, again, in crisis and you don't know what to do, talk. And it just makes such a difference. And actually, you'll probably find with a lot of things, obviously, I'm not likely to find someone else that's been hit by a tractor, but with a lot of things, people will be able to relate and might just make you feel less alone. And that will help you through.
Find connections. Yeah. Amazing. Claire, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
What Claire demonstrates in a way that is both encouraging and humbling is that even in life-changing situations like hers, there's room for perspective. You would have expected Claire, certainly in those early days after her accident, to retreat as she struggled to come to terms with what had happened. But instead, perhaps because of that inbuilt elite athlete attitude of hers, she immediately began to plan, to set goals. That was her coping strategy, her route to survival, and ultimately to what she calls learning a new life. From the very start of our conversation, Claire showed her ability to get above the crisis, to see the bigger picture and gain clarity, so crucial in any crisis situation, and to look at immediately at what she can do as opposed to what she can't. Her early decision to document the journey from accident to present day has brought together an online community, which, as she said, not only helps her on the days she might not be coping so well, but also gives her that deep sense of purpose of being able to help others on a wider level, something which is clearly very important to her. As she said, if I just cracked on with my life and didn't use what had happened to me to help others, what would be the point? Just extraordinary to have that level of selflessness and yet such a broad sense of the importance of what it is to make everything in your life count for something, good or bad. Probably the most surprising thing for me throughout the conversation was Claire's use of the words luck and lucky, not a trace of bitterness there. As she said, building her life up to a point where there was no room for bitterness was a better use of her energies. To one degree or another, she's brought her life back to how it was before, seeing friends, working, training. The simple fact that she's made this her focus means that she doesn't see herself any differently, which of course in turn helps those around her do the same. Claire knows that crisis can't be conquered alone. To surround yourself with the right people, in her case her friends and family, including her sister Alex, all clearly played crucial crisis roles during the days of drama, and as importantly, perhaps more importantly, since real life has resumed. It's Claire's second crisis cure, though, that for me is nothing short of remarkable. Remember that it's a moment in time, she says. It's valid and it's awful, but it can and it will get better. So don't give up, because 99 times out of 100, if you don't give up, you'll get there in the end. Amazing. Thanks for listening to Crisis What Crisis. Feel free to send us your feedback. You'll find our contact details and our show notes giving you the key insights from our guests at crisiswhatcrisis.com. There are also links to our newsletter, Facebook page and Instagram. There are more useful conversations on the way soon, and if you enjoyed this podcast, please do give us a rating and a review. Thanks again.